How important is convenience when a customer buys from you? If you could make it easier for them to buy from you, would they buy more from you? One of the topics that I'm taking on in this episode with farmer Luke Groce coming up. Welcome to Grassfed Life. I'm your host, Diego, D-I-E-G-O. Here at Grassfed Life, one of our goals is to be a resource for you, a resource so you can become more profitable grazing animals on pasture, be that poultry, like I'm going to talk about today with Luke, or cattle, or pigs. Small-scale farming can be viable. So whether you're looking for inspiration or information, we have you covered. From the podcast to blog articles to our paid resources like our online courses, we want to help. Check us out at grassfedlife.co. Today I'm talking to farmer Luke Groce, who's grazing animals in southern Indiana. Luke's been on the podcast twice before, and he joins me today to talk about poultry, specifically turkeys. He's going to talk about his system for grazing turkeys, which is a lot different than Darby's system. Darby grazes his turkeys inside of chicken tractors. Luke does something a little different. He's still on pasture, but he does it in an open cell grazing system. He's going to talk about how he does that, why he does it, things like predator pressure and how they affect that type of system. And he's also going to talk about an alternative way that he's trialing this year to sell those turkeys. Instead of selling them by the pound, he's going to try and sell them a different way, a way that's going to make it easier for him to manage and for the customer to buy. So what exactly is he doing and how is he doing it? Listen in and find out. Here it is, Selling Convenience with Luke Groce. So Luke, you've been on the podcast in the past. We've talked a lot of things, sheep, pastured poultry. I've been on your farm about a year ago, actually, and I did some filming with you, showed your pastured poultry system, showed how you're raising turkeys on pasture. And that's going to be the focus of today's episode, turkeys. When it comes to turkeys, what's the history of turkeys on your farm?
Yeah, last year was our first year, and so when you saw that, you were seeing our first flock last fall, and then we're doing our second batch this year. We've more than doubled it. We're going to finish at about 120 this year, and we had 48 turkeys finished last year.
Given your experience raising them last year, 2017, how did it go? What were some of the challenges that you had either in field and or selling them?
In the field, there weren't really too many challenges. The way we raise turkeys is fairly similar to the way we raise chickens, and so it once we get them past a certain age, there's not too much we feel like there's a need to worry about. They're pretty predator proof as far as the aerial predators go, and the wire takes care of the ground predators. So we feel pretty good. It worked out pretty great for us, and that's why we sort of doubled down. And last year we moved all of them, but we didn't sell out until maybe the week before Thanksgiving. So it wasn't challenging. We just kind of put it out to our current market streams and tried to see who would bite. And we were able to find enough folks at the farmers market and through Instagram and just people who happened upon the website and other people in the area. So it was fine to sell 50 last year, and we're hoping we can sell a fair bit more, but we've got a couple backup plans in case we're not able to increase that as much as we hope.
And we'll really dig into the sales side of things here a little bit later in the episode, but let's start with the base level, the production side of things. Your production's, I'll say, a little bit unique. It's unique at least in the sense of how Darby raises things. He's north of you by a few hours in Indiana, and he raises all of his poultry within movable chicken tractors. He does that for predator protection. And when I came down and saw you at your farm, you don't do that. You have this open cell grazing, is how I would describe it. Basically a net set around a large area with your tractors and shelters within that larger fenced area, but you're never moving the tractor, and the tractor or the shelters never get sealed off. The chickens can go under them, or the turkeys can go under them for shade when needed and as needed. Can you talk first about one of the biggest questions I get around your system and its predators? What's been your experience in that system with predators?
So we've done turkeys, ducks, and chickens with more or less the system you described, and we've, after 3 years of doing birds in these systems, and I guess I don't know if we're in the 10,000 birds range, but we're getting up there total. We've had very good luck with the predators. We get maybe over the course of a year, we'll lose a dozen chickens a year to aerial predators, and the ground predators would be pretty rare. So it's something that's quite tolerable. I've heard of losses equally that bad just through some raccoon grabbing a chicken head through the wire of a chicken tractor. But we've had really good luck. And on the turkey side, we keep them in a chicken tractor and the brooder a little bit longer than chickens. So they're pretty well sized up by the time they come out. So I think most of the hawks scanning the skies in our neighborhood are about the size of our turkeys by the time they kind of finally get to roam that free area. So we don't worry too much about predators with the turkey. I think I lost one bigger one to a predator last year, and somehow it had gotten outside of the fence one night, but I think that's the only one we had.
Do you attribute your low predator rate to there's just not a lot of ground predators in your area, or is it the fact that you have a livestock guardian dog that is discouraging the predators from visiting the poultry?
I don't know which of our systems to say is the most important one. I think the dog is really big on the ground predators, especially. I was up at 4 a.m. this morning and I heard his loud voice kind of echoing from the back corner of the farm, just barking constantly. That's pretty much what they do. They just have this incredibly loud roar that they emit if they see or hear anything, and they'll just bark forever. So it can be pretty annoying if you sleep with the windows open. But they're a big piece of it. The electric netting is a huge piece of it, and I think that's I would say maybe that's the first most important thing to have. But the guardian dog is a close second. And then the thing we added in this year was also we've thrown some geese in there, and they're also just kind of just a big alarm bell. They just honk constantly. One of the reasons I can't talk to you on the farm today because it's really loud in the parts of the farm where I get good reception. But they're just out there. We put a couple geese in each bird paddock, and they're just constantly honking and making loud noises. And if they hear something at night, they'll do that too. So they may not be as good with the nighttime predators, but they help a lot with the aerial predators in the daytime.
With a livestock guardian dog, what breed dog do you have, and how has your experience been so far with that dog on farm?
We have a Pyrenees, and we also have a Pyrenees that's been a quarter cross with a Saint Bernard, and I think that they're great. I think it's probably a good idea to have two, because they can die if they go chasing cars down the road, which they're prone to doing. But we've tried a number of strategies. There's been some frustrations. Sometimes they want to hang out by the front of the house and sort of guard the home and the children more than the animals. And so we've tried some strategies like tying them up temporarily near the birds, or putting them in behind the electric netting. But you usually need a more mature dog to put them in with some birds. But we've had them all around the farm and tried different strategies. But in general, I think they patrol it pretty well, and we've been pretty happy. There's some kinds of training you can do. I'm not a very good dog trainer, but I've gotten some tips and tricks from people and tried to implement kind of basic dog training and encouraging them to be kind to the chickens, making sure they know that they're important to me and they should not play with them.
And your dogs in your fence, like you said, have kept predators at bay along with the geese. That allows you to do this open cell grazing. For people that haven't seen the video, Can you explain how this system works in terms of day-to-day management versus having to move chicken tractors?
Sure. Well, today I moved my chicken fences, and which basically meant I took down 1.5 50-meter panels and sort of set them back up again. But basically, what happens is every 4 to 7 days, depending on how big the birds are, I'll move parts of the wire and the netting and just kind of advance the paddock forward. But that can take up to an hour depending on a few different factors. But I'll move the wire forward so that they're constantly inside of electric netting, but they have got they've got the netting is moving forward, and as the netting moves forward, they're constantly moving forward with their infrastructure, which usually includes feeders, waterers, and shelter. And those things are just kind of moving down the pasture, and the netting is like this halo that goes around them the whole way. I don't have to move the halo every day because they sort of advance from the back of it to the front of it, and then every fourth day or so I'll advance that electro netting halo forward.
So really on a day-to-day basis, it's just topping off feeders, topping off waters, making sure everybody's okay, and that's it.
That's about it. Yeah, I've got, typically chicken chores can be as quick as an hour for 600 birds. And that's when I don't have my new automatic watering system set in place. So they can go quicker than that, but I'm always checking on them a couple times a day, of course, in hot weather especially. And then with the turkeys, it's usually quicker than that. I'll go by and make sure everything's fine. But there's one shade structure on wheels that they've got that I pull forward, and three troughs that I fill with feed and water on a flip valve, and that's about all there is to it. It's almost like more of a walk by than actually any work.
Yeah, it keeps it simple so it's working in your context. Along the lines of raising them, you mentioned that turkeys for you, they stay in the brooder longer than chickens. What tips and suggestions would you have on raising turkeys when it comes to brooder management versus chickens?
So turkeys, we keep them in the brooder for about four and some change weeks, as opposed to a chicken, which would be 2.5, 3 at the most. So that's one big difference. We let them get a lot bigger because they're a little bit weaker at that younger age, and they got to start out with a higher protein and a higher temperature. So just a draft in the brooder early can be really bad for them, really set them back or kill some. And then the protein levels, most people are trying to start at around 28% protein as compared with like the 21 is where we start our chickens. And then it's also pretty key to have some of the other limiting amino acids at ideal levels. So with that, you need to have a really well formulated feed. If you're somebody who kind of wings it or does your own thing, it's a lot harder to dial in that perfect, well formulated turkey feed than it is chickens. If you're like me and you sort of put that all off onto a professional feed mill, then that's all to the good. But just make sure you're getting a turkey starter for the first 4 or so weeks, and then stepping down after that, like we do with chickens. But I guess those are the basics of where to start. After that, we still don't want them outside in a thunderstorm at 4.5 weeks. So we're putting them in a chicken tractor for at least 2, but probably more, almost like 4 weeks. So all the way up to about 8 weeks, they're under a roof. But it's late summer, early fall. There could be chilly nights. There could be some rain, but we don't want them getting caught out in a September thunderstorm. So we've got them underneath a chicken tractor. And birds of that size, they're not the same. They're not as big as a finishing chicken. So you can put them in a pretty similar density to what you'd have like a finishing chicken if you're doing that in a chicken tractor. But then once we have a string of good looking days and they're 7, 8 weeks old, we'll just pop the door open on that chicken tractor. Ours have doors now, and then they're just free to roam around behind that netting, and they do a ton of grazing. We even sometimes when we have our group of 90 older ones in a half acre paddock, they'll pretty much clip the grass down within a day or two to a pretty noticeable level. They do quite a bit of grazing, and that's one of the main reasons why we see such great advantage with the turkeys of putting in this kind of system.
Yeah, I mean, from my experience of just seeing these on different farms, meaning turkeys and chickens, I tend to see the chickens do more trampling. They're definitely eating some greenery, and the turkeys are doing more, like you said, the grazing. They're actually consuming more of the grass, and it's noticeable both when looking at the grass and when you move the poultry to a new patch of pasture.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks more like my sheep came through there than a group of chickens because yeah, it's not just kind of all matted down and pooped on. It's grazed down and then pooped on.
So for you, you're somebody who's doing a lot of enterprises on farm. You have sheep, you have pastured poultry, chickens, you have cattle, you started ducks, you have turkeys. When you added on turkeys last year and then in doing them this year, do you feel like it's much more workload? It sounds like brooder management, okay, there's a little more effort that has to go in there, but once they're on pasture, is it kind of like an addition onto the farm that doesn't add nearly as much work as the benefit it creates? Or you're getting a lot of benefit, but you're also taking a lot of work in the process?
I think the benefit is it definitely outweighs the extra work when you compare it with other alternatives that you could have out there. I mean, we picked up ducks this year, and just kind of looking at the numbers, I need to raise 3 groups of ducks that for about 900 ducks to get the same amount of profit I would off of a group of 120 turkeys in one group. So if that helps any, like, those are 2 different possibilities somebody could bolt onto their farm. But with our markets and what we're doing, we would need to sort of 7x the number of animals and 3x the number of groups of animals total cycles with the different species. So in terms of the work in versus profit out, the turkeys are pretty near the top in terms of the stuff we've added on in the last few years.
And hearing all this, I mean, it works well in your context. It fits well on your land. It fits well with the other enterprises. And you already have an established customer base before you even raised turkeys last year that you could sell these turkeys into. And now I want to start getting into the sales side of things. Did you find that having that existing customer base made it relatively easy to introduce a new product to, especially given that product is a once-a-year seasonal product?
Yes and no. If you include kind of broadly our email contact list, our farmers markets, people who maybe pay attention to Instagram and might have a chance of clicking, like we did throw it out there to the same, few thousand people, but those few thousand people who come across us, who potential customers, we'll throw in Google searches where people end up clicking on our link there. If you take all these people, yes, we were able to find enough buyers to sell turkeys to last year within that broader group. But if you kind of go down the sales funnel, it's a different funnel from the group of people who were buying other products like our meat CSA or even a pack of bratwurst at the farmers market. We tended to find that there were people who walked by our farmers market booth every week, and then they saw the turkey sign and they finally walked up, or other people who saw the post on Instagram and had never bought anything from us before, but they did buy the Thanksgiving turkey. And I think that high-end Thanksgiving turkeys are a little bit different market group than sort of the daily driver. I'm going to eat integrity meat every single day that I eat meat sort of people. There's overlap there, but there's less overlap than you might think. I think a lot of those people in that daily meat group, they're probably they just might see one piece of meat that costs $100+ as cost prohibitive, whereas $100 worth of good quality meat every month spread out over the whole month is totally worth it. So that's that's one variation. I would say we found the customers, but many, if not most of them, were not actually the same exact people.
That's interesting because that's kind of the opposite I would have expected thinking about this. So your regular meat box customers weren't as interested as the more casual person that occasionally or never buys from you.
Yeah, and I mean, some of those people were even like a vegetarian at the farmers market who, like, my family's getting together and there will be meat prepared, and I don't want it to be tortured meat, like to actually quote the customer. So they said, we're not going to buy meat from you ever, but if we're going to be at a meal where our family is gathering, we're going to lobby for it to be your meat. And so that, that'd be the one time that person bought meat all year when their family's coming over. And so it's someone like that, or just people who have money and want to throw some money down on the most special meal of the year, but maybe they get their meat elsewhere, or they don't see integrity meat as being important, and so they kind of, unless it's a special occasion, they just kind of don't splurge for it. I was surprised, but it was out of our 60 CSA shares. I mean, top of my head, I want to say maybe half a dozen people from that list were actually buying turkeys. So low when you consider that those are people who are kind of all in on getting their meat from our farm.
We'll touch on this a little bit later, but let's say you had turkey available in parts or smaller packs year round. Do you think the meat CSA customers would have interest in it then, given that, let's say they had the option to add or substitute turkey into their box?
I've thought about different ways of doing that. To my mind, they're sort of like the products you can get from a turkey are the whole bird sold. Almost nobody's going to cook that outside of Thanksgiving or maybe Christmas. And then if you start breaking it down, you could have a whole breast to roast. So that's also sort of like a small Thanksgiving gathering kind of thing. I don't think most people are going to go through the trouble of roasting that. You could oven roast that breast and then turn it into sandwich meat. But that you need a pretty good slicer, and you need additional inspected processes and the regulatory components. So that's something we figured out. I mean, I would love to try to figure out the sandwich meat market, but exactly what inspected facility is going to help us provide cold cuts to people, I don't know. We haven't figured that out, but I think that could be a great potential. And then on the leg side, I think those parts are pretty hard to find buyers for outside of Thanksgiving, unless you take any or all of the parts of the turkey and grind them. And our bird butcher last year did not provide any sort of deboning or grinding, but our new one we've started using this year does both, and he does it at a pretty good price point, and I think we can make it work. So that's sort of my plan is in raising 2.5 times the number of turkeys. Part of the plan was that if we couldn't retail them all, we'd try a couple wholesale channels. If that didn't work out, we would have ground turkey as a option for farmers markets, CSAs, even wholesale customers if they wanted it.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing this because what I'm thinking is it's almost like you're not selling meat in the sense of daily eating. Like you said, your daily driver, their consumption of meat. Like turkey's not in that category or in that spectrum. It's more you're selling an experience, you're selling something special that has a fit one time a year in a very limited window, sold one way. And it's like you got to pound the table and make as many sales as you can in that window because that's it. And the people buying it, they probably want it, like you said, for different reasons than the average person is buying just pastured poultry. It's not just the clean food. It's, I want something extra special for this holiday because I value this holiday so much. So you kind of have to treat it, I think, differently when you market it than if you're just selling a whole chicken.
No, absolutely. It's there's a different pitch for sure when you're thinking about how to get into that person's story and be the one who helps them get to success, whatever their version of success looks like. The mom who's worried about a pig that might have encountered Roundup in its diet on a daily basis, being where the bacon comes from is different than, the baby boomer who wants to have a centerpiece at their table that they can be really proud of. I mean, those are just dramatically different conversations and desires and fears and concerns and hopes. So, if you're going to try to get into having a conversation with people about, how to provide that for them, there's different things you need to think about making sure you're communicating.
Of the stuff you're talking to customers about when it comes time for turkeys, what are the things that you're highlighting? And in conversations, I mean both direct, I'm standing in front of you, we're talking about turkeys, and indirect through either direct email marketing or indirect via something like Instagram.
We highlight what we're providing. We're growing broad-breasted whites. They're pretty much the industry standard, but we highlight not the breed, but we highlight what we do offer that's different, which is turkeys that are free to roam the silvopasture kind of environment. We don't use that word to the broader public, but they're free to roam tree-dotted pastoral landscapes like the original Thanksgiving turkeys were enabled to, enjoying forages of bugs and persimmons and grass and nuts and all sorts of other good things that are available there. And we make sure to let people know, like, this is the kind of food we're offering. It has a more interesting depth of flavor, and it's juicier and richer. And we try to bring all those things to the fore in that communication, whether it's like a flyer I pass at the farmer's market. It says a lot of those things I mentioned, but then we're also trying to communicate things like, where's the price point, and one of the two more features I'll throw in there. The what you're going to pay, which we'll describe that later when we talk about that part of our system. But then there's also all of our poultry period are air chilled, and then the turkeys in particular are going to be sold fresh, and that matters to a lot of people too. And I've heard some people say that the air chilling and the freshness really do make a big difference. When you combine that with brining, you really are doing everything someone can do post harvest to assure that you're getting kind of the highest quality product in the end on the table.
It's important to know those features when you're talking to customers because, like you said, as we'll talk about, these can be pricey pieces of meat, and there might be some initial balkback or questioning when the price comes up. Before we get into pricing, I want to start with your costs. You send me a spreadsheet, and we'll start going through that spreadsheet because I think it's really important to talk about what it costs you to raise a bird before we get into what you can sell it for, because what you can sell it for is irrelevant unless we compare it against what goes into it. So looking at your sheet, you buy 150 poults. For those, you pay $6.92 each.
Actually, in the sheet, I amortized the 150 poults over the 120 poults. So I think I pay $5.77 to my door, and then the 30 dead birds were kind of lumped in there. So the amount I ended up paying in baby turkey poults per turkey that I finished would be $6.92. I didn't amortize the dead birds in a different way. I amortized it in that line item. So in the end, that's what I did end up paying. $7 per poult that I finished, but to my door it was $5.77 before you include the death loss.
So as we go through this, everybody can keep in mind, Luke ordered 150. He's projecting 120 make it to the not freezer fresh so they can be sold. So all these costs will reflect 120, and they'll pick up the cost of those 30 that die along the way. So you have $7 per finished bird into the poult. Your feed projected is $12.60.
And you can round up to 13 for the dead. The feed was eaten by the dead birds. I've got another line item there, but for ease, yeah, $13 feed and $7 for poult is pretty close to what we've got on the sheet there.
So right there, you're already at $20 into one. Transportation to and from the processor, $5 per bird. Processing, $10 per bird, grit, $1.20. And so you're in it at the end of the day, a total cost per bird, $36. When it comes time to looking at that cost, is that just what it costs? Or is there a way that you could get that down? And I don't mean 25 cents. Is there a way to significantly reduce that cost at all?
There would be a couple possible ways. I mean, we could find some cheaper source for poults, but unless you've got some insider relationships, or you're doing a much larger quantity than this, I don't think you can get poults for much cheaper than $5.77. I will add, like, we had somebody left the garage door open where we brewed, and we lost. This is a 20% death loss. This is way higher than we had hoped for, but we lost about 17 in one day in the brooder. So if your death loss is more like 10% compared with 20%, then you're not amortizing as many dead birds into that number. That would help you out quite a bit, I'm sure. But it wouldn't knock down your feed, since they don't eat very much before, like, by the age of the ones that did die. But unless you live closer to your processor than I do, which probably many people might, there's not much you can do to knock that down, to my eye. That's about what we end up paying to produce. And I would just add one more thing with the feed. You could feed a turkey more and then get all big birds, but we have some small and some big. So you could end up spending more money if you're trying to raise all big birds. But we're trying to have a wide range of sizes here, and that's why we're able to do it with more or less about 50 pounds per bird.
So at 50 pounds per bird of feed going in, $36 cost per bird, what do these average out to in terms of weight?
So we've got the plan this year to have 15 and 12-week-old birds, both males and females. There's some pretty helpful charts you can find online that'll tell you sort of the amount that'll be eaten and how big a broad-breasted turkey will get from week to week all the way down the line. And you can use those charts, and they're helpful. And it's possible that a turkey that can roam freely, from what I hear, they're going to exercise more and they'll burn more calories. They'll probably eat more and burn more calories, even though they're eating a lot of pasture too. That salad is not really compensating for the exercise. But all to say, in the end, we're expecting to have, I think it's about 25 turkeys that are in the 12-pound range, 60 turkeys that are in the 17-pound range, and then another 35 that are sort of in the 20-pound range. That's what we're aiming for in the end. And based on our experience talking to people, that's kind of what we expect we'll be able to deliver.
So you're going to end up with some pretty large birds. Given that you have $36 a piece into those birds on average, how do you start to think about pricing? Because, I mean, on one hand, you have to think about, this is what my costs are going into it. And on the other hand, you don't want to have, or maybe you do want to have, a $200 turkey. How do you weigh, here's what I need to get out of this at the end of the day to make sense?
At the end of the day, I mean, we know that turkeys are sort of like a once a year shot of opportunity. So we are trying to make sure we're able to provide ourselves some profit to go into the winter and pay the last feed bill. And so we're okay with it being something that we get a little bit higher profit margin on compared with the other market, other enterprises we do around the farm. So yeah, and I'll just also preface that all these numbers don't include my labor. We do the labor ourselves, and we do have a way of kind of figuring labor in sort of at the end of the day, but it's not in the enterprise sheets right now the way I have them listed. It'd be better if it was, but it's not. But in terms of how we are deciding on prices, we're trying to find a price point that we think will work for people, and we did the multiple sizes in hopes that we could sort of broaden our scope of the range of people we'd be able to make happy by providing birds of various sizes and prices for the different sizes of families. So we take the number that we end up spending on an average bird, and obviously a bigger bird's going to eat more, and it's going to eat more grit. And the processing, the way we do it actually with our butcher, actually costs a little bit more per they do that by the pound too. So the bigger birds are a little bit cheaper per pound, but in general, the costs go up as the bird gets bigger, for the most part. So we basically just tried to figure out where we could market them at in each of those size ranges, and then kind of what it looked like per pound. And so the small bird people are paying more per pound, in our system, where we have these three price brackets we're doing all the birds in. But it's fair for them too, because they're also, the turkey poll at the beginning costs the same price, whatever the size bird is, and they're still driving the same number of miles in the back of the truck too.
The idea of assigning birds a fixed cost based upon a size range, I think, is a little bit unique. It's definitely never came up on this show before. Can you explain the idea here, first in terms of why? Why do you want to offer a small, medium, large to a consumer versus just saying, here's what it is per pound?
In some ways, I thought if we could be a little bit more sort of consumer friendly, then we might be able to just be able to sell more, because we'd be taking out some of the reasons why people would be saying no. So that's a big part of why we ended up trying to not just raise all males, all toms, but we got both genders, and we also got younger birds too. So that enables us to have the wide range of sizes. But then, in terms of trying to get all those birds in the brackets, I just kind of thought that we'd have an easier time making sure customers are happy in the end, and making sure that they end up putting their money on the barrel and buying at the beginning. And so my hope was that in creating this kind of no nonsense pricing, you know what you're going to pay, and you know your bird's going to be about this size, that we'd hopefully have happy people who would have a quick transaction on that pickup day, and that we'd be able to just end up selling the birds is, I guess, the main goal.
So I like the idea of simplicity here. It's, the price going in, and you're going to get a big bird, a small bird, a large bird. Defining those ranges, how did you go about doing that and trying to keep them somewhat realistic so you don't have a 12-pound bird and a 15-pound bird in one category?
A few things. First of all, we gave people a pretty broad size range. We said, if you're buying a small, it's going to be like 9 to 14. We'll try to, if you want the specific size in there, we'll see what we can do, but we're not promising. So we try to make sure we weren't over promising anything. There's those size ranges. But then beyond that, I mean, we know based on the charts that the older females and the younger males will all end up in the middle price size range, and the younger females will end up in the small range. And so those younger females, according to the charts, they should end up dressing out right around 12 pounds. And then with some variation, they'll end up on either side of that. And we promise people 9 to 14. So what my plan would be to take if you take that any of the size ranges, say the 9 to 14 size range, we'll take the top and the bottom of that, and we'll pull them out. We'll probably end up pulling them out, and they could end up in our ground turkey that we end up producing with the birds we didn't sell, or they could end up going to this one wholesale buyer who wants to buy about 25 birds this fall for their buying club. So they may end up buying some of the top and the bottom of each size range, and that way we end up having more right down the middle in what's being sold to our retail customers, and that way people are getting something even closer than what we promised to our expected size range.
One of the objections I could hear people saying about this is you're going to get a lot of people nitpicking about, I wanted the bigger end of the small range and not the smaller end. And you got this one and it weighs an extra 1.5 pounds. That's $9 more than what I got for the same price. What are your thoughts around that?
It's totally possible. I mean, I talked with my friend Mark from Timber Feast Farm in Illinois about these kinds of things, and he claims there's no way to do turkeys where you won't have at least one or two complainers who don't like something about the way it ended up for them. So it's totally possible that, on our high end range or whatever, I think it's 19 to 24 pounds. Like, there could be somebody who shows up again and we hand them their 19-pound turkey that we promised them. And, the website and the flyer all said, we promise a turkey in this range, not that you get whatever size you want within the range. They may not have read the fine print. They may have, their expectations may have drifted from the written communications, and they may say, I wanted a 24-pound turkey. And, it totally could happen. We try really hard to communicate, and I'm hoping by, planning on grinding some, we can sort of, remove some of the outliers and just dial down the center. But according to my experience and talking with people and the turkey growth charts I've read, the majority of the birds should end up in the middle of the promised size ranges. And so, I think we can get people there, and we printed the range so that people would know that variation would be expected. It's not going to be 18, give or take. Or it's not going to be 20, give or take. It's going to be 19 to 24. So in the end, you definitely can't make everybody happy. And if making everybody happy is important to you, you probably shouldn't run a business. But we're trying awfully hard to get as close to that as we can with this kind of big purchase.
Yeah, I'm thinking about this. I'm trying to give my unbiased thoughts on it. And I think it makes sense. Like, I like the idea of it. You're buying something artisan. It's like if you buy a piece of pottery from somebody at the farmer's market, like, not every cup is going to look the exact same. And I look at this in the same category of, it's $5 to $15 maybe difference between the extremes on some of these birds. Is somebody paying that much attention, or do they care that much that they're really squawking? Somebody might, but I think most people, the idea of convenience and I know what I'm getting is easy. I mean, this is easy. I want a small, medium, or large. Here's how much it costs. Bam. If it's a little more, a little less, who cares? I think the person buying the small, medium, large choice isn't so worried about where am I going to fall within the subcategory of large.
And I've had a conversation at the farmer's market even the last couple of weeks. Someone said, I think I need a 14-pound turkey. And I've said the medium size range is 15 to 18. You're going to want to get that and have some leftovers, because I'm not going to promise you a 14-pound turkey. But, those conversations can happen unless they're buying on the website. But hopefully they're reading the fine print. And I think you're right. It's, in the end, it's possible someone who likes to complain about things might find a reason to be unhappy. But I think in general, it's going to work for most reasonable people. And, you can't let your Thanksgiving be ruined by a couple unreasonable people. So just realize that those people exist, and you'll have to deal with them if you run a business, and maybe you won't deal with the same person again if you made them too unhappy.
I guess the alternative to this, and you alluded to it a little bit earlier, is if you're just selling per pound and you're selling to a group of customers, 120 customers, they all sign up for a turkey, then it becomes either when it's time for you to collect your turkey, here, I'm handing you whatever I'm handing you, it's yours and this is what you got to pay. Or it becomes a super logistical nightmare of, what size did you want? Let me look through all of these groups and find that one and then give it to you. Yeah, and that seems like that would be a lot more complex. So you're kind of taking all that back-end worry, all that back-end confusion, and simplifying it down to this, which maybe irks some people, which maybe creates some confusion on the front end, but I don't think it creates anywhere near as much confusion or sticker shock on the back end. Because that's the other thing. Somebody might think, hey, I'm going to get a turkey. It's going to cost about $120, but I got the big, huge one. It's actually $160.
Yeah, we had a little bit of that last year. We had all these tom turkeys, and we asked people what their size preference would be, and we said we're going to try to hit it as close as we can, but this is the per pound price. And so, yeah, we came in and we put all the numbers in a spreadsheet for the sizes requested, and we put the numbers in a spreadsheet for the sizes we ended up having, and it turned out everyone was going to have a 3 to 6 pounds heavier than what they ordered. So the people on the small end, especially, were the ones getting the ones that were a lot bigger. So someone who asked for a 12-pound turkey got a 19-pound turkey. And, that person who we had a pretty high per pound price because it was our first year and we kind of wanted to leave some margin. So I recall them kind of choking and saying, wow, that's a lot more money than I planned to spend. And all I could say was, I'm sorry. We actually ended up giving everybody 3 free pounds of turkey last year to sort of try to smooth that over. But in the end, I tried to not overpromise, and it ended up being that I did overpromise kind of how close we were going to get to people's goals. So you can do the math, but 12 times 6.5 versus 12 times versus 19 times 6.5 is a pretty big price difference for somebody on a budget.
Yeah, and again, it simplifies the shock, because here's what you get, here's how much it costs. It's simple, and I think we're moving into a world of tell me what to pay, tell me what I'll get, and then it's a done deal. These boxes you order online, it's okay, I'm going to get 5 days worth of food and it's going to cost $65, or if I want the larger one, it's this. It's not necessarily priced out per meal. They've kind of standardized it. Each meal costs $11.50 and this is what you get. When you look at these categories, small, medium, large, I'm going to do some rounding based off your sheet, but basically it works out like this. 1 unit of small, 2 units of medium, 1 unit of large. So if you had 4 turkeys, that's kind of how they break out. We're recording this on October 1st, 6-7 weeks before Thanksgiving. Based on interest so far, where has your current interest fallen into those 3 categories, if you had to ballpark it?
So the weather here in southern Indiana and Kentucky has only recently had like a few cool nights. So we've sold about a dozen, like 10% of our turkeys here on October 1st, and I'm not fretting about it too hard. I think that when the air gets a little cooler, that's when people will start thinking about fall related things. There's an October on the calendar that might help. So so out of the 10% of the turkeys we've sold so far, it breaks pretty evenly between them all. I think with that bell curve of more in the medium, I haven't even looked at it recently, but there might be half of our turkeys have been sold in that range, and then it might break the other 6 sold turkeys might break 2 to 1 on the large side. But it's not far off from the bell curve we sort of planned in there.
And using average pricing, do all these categories come out to about the same price per pound?
The small birds do end up paying a little bit more per pound, if I recall correctly. If you took kind of like the bird down the middle of each size range, then it would be the larger bird you get in general, the cheaper it is per pound. But it's within 50 cents per pound, I think.
So looking at these, small bird, $65, medium bird, $88, large bird, $110. Given that you have an average cost per bird of $36, that's average, all weights, small through big. Is there anywhere in those categories you think you'll get hurt from the cost side? Like, do you think one of those birds is going to be less profitable at the end of the day, one of those categories, than the other?
The largest bird in each size range would be where we would make the least profit, logically. And so that'd be the 14-pound birds and the 18-pound birds and the 24-pound birds. Incidentally, we have a wholesale buyer who's interested in 18 and 24-pound birds. And so, they're willing to pay, I think, $4.60 a pound, and we're going to work with them, and we'll probably give them a lot of those. But I also, I don't want to give anybody, I don't want to throw out very many birds that are in the bottom of any of the size ranges either. We would obviously, a 9-pound bird that we're selling for $65 would be a very high price per pound compared with any of the other birds we're selling. So I'd be fine to either grind just to make sure it's not too much in my favor or the customer's favor. I would be fine to grind or retail, or wholesale the ends of the spectrum, just to try to keep everything closer to the middle.
And that's one thing I like that you've done on this sheet when I'm looking at it here is you've given yourself 3 options, as you said, good, better, best, of ways you can sell. So your preferred method to move all 120 is the small, medium, large to retail customer. If there's some leftovers, what's the next best way that you have on here?
And these are in order of, I'll just say cash flow considerations first. So the customers are essentially putting all their money into my bank account in October, if they're buying retail. But then the second option in terms of cash flow considerations would be the wholesale. I might end up with a restaurant that wants some delivered on, say that Friday afternoon before Thanksgiving. We'll see. I haven't had those conversations with chefs yet, but that's one option we could go with. But that would be an option where we still end up getting paid, in that time horizon of Thanksgiving time. But it would be a cheaper price. And then the last option would be to grind the turkeys, and pay my butcher to debone them and grind them. And that would end up costing us a lot of money. So we have to fork over additional money before we even get paid finally. And then we have to find buyers, which is not necessarily guaranteed, and then move that product to those buyers and, communicate about new products. So that third option, we could price it, and I think I will price it to where I actually end up making about as much money, per turkey. But in the end, we're going to have to fork over some more money, wait longer, do some more work. So that's why that's kind of the third option, even though it potentially brings our profit back up as compared with more of the wholesale side.
Right. So any ones that are unsold, I mean, your worst case scenario isn't we're eating turkey every week for the next year. It's we can turn this into ground, throw it in the freezer. And I like on the chart that you made, you looked at all these numbers. For example, if you sell wholesale, you're going to take a profit reduction of about $300 by going the wholesale route versus if you sell the retail route. Percentage-wise, that looks like, so about a 5% reduction going that route. And then if you go the ground turkey option, by the time you get the yield off of the turkey from removing the bone, by the time you pay the butcher $1.50 to debone and grind, to keep at parity against retail, you need to be charging $11.50 a pound for your ground turkey. Thinking of that, I mean, $11.50 a pound for ground. I don't know. Do you think there's a market for that? Ben Grimes, I believe he was selling ground chicken. I think he's over $10 on that. And I think he'd have a market for that, maybe in his market in Raleigh-Durham area. $11.50 where you're selling in Louisville.
So in short, I definitely don't know enough to say we have a great market for it. I think it's pretty likely we could sell some at the farmers market, and it could be an item we just kind of add a few into the cooler and put it on our board, and we'll see what happens. But there are, I think that the low fat regime and American nutritional advice is dying a slow death, but still the majority of people in America think that fat, in particular animal fats, are unhealthy. But ground turkey is the lean ground meat that you can make spaghetti out of. I think that's the idea that American households have about it. So, it doesn't necessarily fit exactly with the ideals of a lot of our customers, but I think that a certain brand of health conscious customer, so maybe the majority of people who sort of think in health conscious terms are open to that idea, and that's what it costs for us to produce it. So that's what we're going to charge for it. But I would say that with the meat CSA shares, I suspect it's going to taste great because our turkeys have tasted great in the past. I've never really eaten much ground turkey myself at any period in time, but yeah, I think that if it doesn't sell very well, or maybe even if it is selling pretty well, we might end up putting some of those in our meat CSA shares. And if I could move quite a few turkeys worth of ground turkey in just 1 month of meat CSAs. And over winter, we start running low on some poultry. So it can be nice to, maybe have just kind of one different poultry option in there when in April, when the chickens are all kind of out of the freezer. So we'll see, but I don't suspect that it'll be too hard to move a fair bit of it. It probably depends on whether we have 100 pounds or 1,000 pounds too.
You know, if you go into the meat CSA, on one hand, it's a great option to have because those are totally customizable based upon how you plan them out. They're not really customer driven in terms of what goes in the box. How would you look at that? Would you have to compare that against, say, beef or lamb at $11.50 a pound and sub out one of those versus subbing out chicken, which is, I don't remember what you charge for chicken, but I'm assuming it's in the $6-ish range?
Yeah. So our when I'm compiling my meat CSA shares, I'll get on the computer and I have a spreadsheet where I'll punch in the item and how many pounds of it, and then what the retail price is. And so and I'll kind of, sub in and out things and try to figure out what'll work based on my knowledge of my inventory. But when I'm doing that work with a spreadsheet, like the smallest CSA share, the economy shares, they pay $75 a month, and they're getting pretty much about $90 worth of meat. We tell all our people you get about 20% more retail value than what you end up paying for. And so I'm looking on the spreadsheet and trying to reach a $90 level. I'm usually averaging a little higher than that, and then when I throw odd size packages in, I'm trying to average higher too. So in the end, it's a little bit higher than 90 because of rounding errors. But I'm trying to hit $90 for the value of their total share. So 1 month it could be, I don't have the spreadsheet in front of me, but this month people got bacon, breakfast sausage, a bigger whole chicken, I think 2.5 pounds of chicken wings, and a beef roast, and there's one or two other items in there besides that, ground beef. So anyway, those are the items in there, but I wouldn't necessarily sub one out, sub another one in. It would be chicken thigh month instead of chicken wings, and there'd be a totally different price point for how much they're getting of that particular item. Might be pork chops instead of beef roast. But the ground turkey could be in there in place of a different ground meat, or it could be there in place of the chicken drums. I mean, the chicken parts. It depends on what's coming off the farm each month, and kind of how it mixes up to make a nice diverse box.
What's your gut feeling going into this of how many turkeys you think you'll have left over? 0? You think you'll sell them all?
It is tough to say. I've thought about maybe even like doing some Facebook or Google ads to try to retail more of them, because it does solve some of the cash flow issues that a farm has this time of year. To go ahead and sell them, with our A option, which is retail them with upfront money paid. But I suspect, with the 25 wholesale commitments, I believe this is more or less 95 birds. I think that if we sold 60, I'd be fine with that, and that would be only a small increase from last year on our retail side. So, my gut feeling is we can hit 60 without too much difficulty, I think, and if we end up selling 75, 80 plus, then that's fine too. I'd be great with that. Yeah. So I think we'll hit that range. I feel fairly confident. I mean, the ground option is not terrible. It just kind of means we gotta fork over more money and let it sit in the freezer and wait to pay us back. But that option can be okay too.
Let's say you sell 60 at the end of the day, 50% of what you raised. How do you think about, was it the fixed price option that led to low sales, or was it something else? What I'm getting at is, outside of, say, your stress level or your customer's experience, how do you quantify if this model of selling fixed price birds works?
That's a good question. I don't know if, how many return customers we get next year would be a pretty good measure of how well it works, because, if we have a higher number of return customers, because of this model, then that would hopefully, mean we're retaining those and we can pick up more, and then we can continue to increase over time. But in the end, it's my second year doing this enterprise, and it's my first year doing it this way. And I think it might just take time to get us to be sort of like the or one of the go-to farms for good high quality pastured turkeys in the area. There's others who have been doing it for a while, so I think that unless we were to get a local grocery to start selling them for us or doing more wholesale accounts, I think we're trying to put ourselves out there and hope that we get more bites each year. So I'm okay to have my expectations not terribly high, but maybe I need to pound the pavement and really go out there and try to find the new customers. But at this point, I'm just trying to. Now that the weather's turning, I'm trying to figure out exactly what that marketing strategy is going to be for the next 6 weeks.
You mentioned cash flow is one of the considerations for all of your sales options. And I know for a lot of farms, well, heck, for a lot of small businesses, cash flow is always a challenge. When you have $36 into a bird that you're basically fronting, that's a lot to carry through. On the small, medium, large, when a customer orders that, how much are they putting down?
Oh, they're paying the full price. Yeah, they put all the money on the barrel. And that might deter some people, to hand over that much money to a stranger without the product, basically being sight unseen. So I don't know if that'll deter people, but that would be one of the negatives to this model. But the positive is that it helps us with cash flow. And, if we are passing over 100 birds on that final day or any number, it's going to be a lot quicker transaction without swiping a card, taking a check, writing down a driver's license on the face of the check, or whatever it is you're doing. We want to make that day where we're running a farmers market stand and have all these turkeys that are going out the door. We want to make that as smooth as possible.
Knowing that a lot of your customers for turkeys, are non-reoccurring or annually reoccurring, with last year as an example, and you have a meat box customer base that buys from you regularly, I'm thinking as somebody who does retail sales, have you thought about offering your meat box customers a discount above and beyond what general public would pay? They're bought into you. They're paying you all year. You got some wiggle room in these turkeys. You got a lot of turkeys and you're worried maybe I don't sell them all. Could you go to them and do a discount? Have you considered that? Or what are your thoughts when I throw that out there? I mean, feel free to tell me, I don't like that idea.
I hadn't thought of that. I think it's a great idea. I think, whether it's a discount code or some other way to try to say, sending an email just saying, hey, click this link, where you can buy our turkeys. But, all of our customers get $10 off or something. I mean, that would essentially put them, by taking $10 off, that would put them close to kind of that wholesale, range, but still something we could totally handle, to give that back out of the profit. And in the end, keeping those CSA customers happy and keeping their connection to our farm is a real important piece of our business. And I mean, many of them are already telling a lot of friends and family about our business, but if they're doing that around their Thanksgiving table, in addition to other times throughout the year, that's also a potential big win for us because they're already kind of our biggest cheerleaders. So we're providing a centerpiece around which they can cheer. I think it makes sense. Yeah, I like the idea of it. Perhaps we will do that.
Yeah, I always just like the idea of offering benefits to frequent, reoccurring customers, whether they take advantage of those benefits or not, I think is a little bit irrelevant. Just the fact that they get an offer to save more. It's like, well, they thought of me. They reached out to me. I'm not interested in the turkey, but I appreciate that I got this versus somebody who's not involved. It just gives you more buy-in, more of a feeling like you're in this exclusive little club.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Another reason why I think it could be a great idea. I like it.
Well, overall, I think this model is really interesting. We'll have to follow up sometime next year and see how it all worked out. I'm really curious to know what the weight ranges are, how all the final numbers looked. But for somebody who's looking for a different way to sell turkeys, to simplify things down, I think this makes a lot of sense. I love the idea of here's your 3 choices, here's what they are, take it or leave it. Complain now if you don't like it, but this is what you got.
Hopefully it ends up being as good as I hope it is. But yeah, I think it will. It'll turn out to be simple, and hopefully it'll improve sales too. We'll see. But yeah, I'd love to let you know if you want to hear more about it this winter.
Well, for people who want to follow along with what you're doing, see what you're doing, you post a lot of great pictures of your farm on Instagram. What's your handle for that, and where else can they go to learn more about everything that you guys are doing?
Sure. Yeah, we're on Instagram at Groce Family Farm, GROCE Family Farm. And then you can find pretty much the same content put on our Facebook page too, if you prefer. It all goes over there as well. Our website where we sell turkeys, if you kind of want to see how that works, it's a pretty simple Shopify site, but I think it looks pretty good. It's Groce Family Farm, again, GROCE familyfarm.com.
There you have it, Luke Groce of Groce Family Farm. If you want to follow along with Luke and everything that he's doing on his farm in southern Indiana, be sure to follow him on Instagram, which I've linked to in the show description for this one. If you want to listen to some of the past podcast episodes that I've done with Luke, you can hear them right here on this feed, or if you're sitting at a computer, go out to grassfedlife.co/podcast and just search for Luke in the podcast player there, and you'll see his previous episodes pop up. And while you're on that site, if you're interested in learning a little more, be sure to check out the blog articles or some of the courses that we now offer at Grassfed Life. We now have 3 courses, one on pastured poultry, one specifically on processing those poultry on farm, and then there's the Farm Business Essentials course, the granddaddy of them all, the all-encompassing, if you want to start a farm business, then take this course because it covers every step of the way in what you're going to need to do and think about when you start that farm business. So learn more about that and view Luke's old podcasts at grassfedlife.co. That's all for this one. Thanks for listening. Next week, I'll be back with another episode of Grassfed Life. Until then, be nice, be thankful, and do the work.